For a fair bit to get across, joining me now, as he does every Monday, the Australian's national editor, Denis Shanahan. Denis, welcome as always. I need to get your assessment on this anti-Semitism that really has reached epidemic levels in Australia, and then the corollary of a whole lot of people inside Labor. There's sources in the papers today saying there's now serious tension within the government about how it responds to this issue. Some senior politicians are saying there's red-hot anger in Labor electorates. The president of the Islamic Council of Victoria, Adel Salman, says the Muslim community has, quote, substantially turned against Labor. So Labor's saying not enough is being done to support the pro-Palestinian movement. Rank and file members, we're told, to are resigning. On the other side, what you can see demonstrated is not Islamophobia, Denis, it's anti-Semitism. And there are very serious Jewish leaders now calling for the Prime Minister to stand up and do more to condemn it. Give us your sense of things.
Well, indeed, there are tensions within the Labor Party. Clearly, we saw a debate at the last national conference over enhancing their position on Palestine. And so this has been developing for quite a while. There's been institutional change within the Labor Party, particularly the New South Wales Labor Party, over the last 30 to 40 years. There is now a progressive support for Palestine, where once there was a pro-US, pro-Israel position. And I think what we're seeing, as well as this institutional shift, as the march comes through the universities and into the political parties, including the Greens, we actually have a demographic shift with its own politics, putting pressure on the ALP, where we have 10 of the top 12 electorates in Australia with the highest levels of people of Middle Eastern heritage. 10 are Labor. The top 3 are all held by Labor ministers, all in Western Sydney. So there is enormous internal pressure on the Labor Party, but even so, this doesn't account for the confusion, for the lack of clarity in the government's position towards Israel and, of course, anti-Semitism.
I made the point, though, Bob Hawke went to Israel in 71, he met with Golda Meir, he went back in 73. The first non-Israeli there on the ground in the Yom Kippur War, the aftermath of that. He came back to Australia, ACTU president as he was then, went toe-to-toe with Gough Whitlam and said, you can't be even-handed with these radical dictatorships and the democracy of Israel. I reject this play. We're seeing it with some leaders. We're seeing it with the Liberal leader in Victoria, John Pizzuto. The moment he speaks about anti-Semitism, he's got to throw Islamophobia in there. Now, I'm not seeing people turn up to mosques and stop people going to Friday prayers like we're seeing in the synagogues in Melbourne. So I guess my concern is you've got Keir Starmer, the Labor leader in the UK. He had 60 of his own backbench demand a stronger position on Palestine. He says no. We're doing the right thing by Israel. He's saying, I reject a ceasefire. He had one of his frontbenchers resign, but Albanese, he's been all but silent on this issue.
Well, he has made some comments, and today in Parliament, he went so far as to say he condemned the motorcade, the provocative motorcade that went through the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and of course, the protests outside the synagogue. I made a point in the Australian's website this afternoon that we haven't seen Israeli protesters going outside mosques in Lakemba. So there is no need for equivalence. There is. Now, there is a point where, of course, we don't want to see anti-Semitism, nor do we want to see Islamophobia, nor sectarianism or any other racism or discrimination. But the point is, at the moment, it is Jews who are the target of some very vile campaigns, violent protests, and more threats to come, including death threats. And so what we should not see is a conflation of the argument about what Israel is doing with what Jews must suffer in Australia as a result. And this requires political leadership from Anthony Albanese, clarification from Penny Wong to separate the global security issue of what amounts to tensions and war in the Middle East to what is a domestic security issue, ensuring the citizens of Australia have freedom of movement and are not afraid. This is where there is no room for equivalence, and it should be purely at the moment on the issue of anti-Semitism and seeking what we can do to prevent it. There was no equivalence during the Cronulla riots when people of Middle Eastern appearance were being targeted by drunken brawlers. The New South Wales Police stepped in with batons and pepper spray to defend those people who were clearly under threat from a much larger aggressive group.
I think you turn your mind to a Kevin Rudd or a John Howard or a Tony Abbott. I don't think that I've only made a couple of comments about anti-Semitism and what has been a very difficult month now since the atrocities. I think the Prime Minister is wanting. I think he's being shown up as weak across the board. We saw that Resolve poll, and more than half the electorate now says cost of living is the biggest issue for us. It's a test for Labor. He's had falling support in that Resolve poll. He's had a quite significant support drop last week out of News poll. All the foreign travel, you know, it's hurting him. I can see it too. We've got APEC coming up. He'll leave Australia again. I can't understand why on earth he doesn't send the Deputy Prime Minister to APEC. I think he's got fires at home. Cost of living is one of them. This issue about cohesion in the community obviously is a bigger other issue for us, Dennis. He needs time behind his desk, in my view.
I think that's right, and I think that the Prime Minister recognises that himself. I think it would have been better to send Richard Marles as the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister for Defence, as well as the former Minister for the Pacific. He is perfectly prepared to be able to handle the Pacific Island Forum meeting. Another indication that the Prime Minister feels that his overseas travel is hurting him. This is the first parliamentary sitting today that we've had since the Prime Minister met the President of the United States in the United States and the President of China in China. Now, this was a significant series of meetings, and it was the first time an Australian Prime Minister met the Chinese President in more than 7 years. And yet today in Parliament, Mr Albanese left the issue of China to the last question in question time. Number 18 was the question he was asked about China. He dealt with it quickly and then called an end to question time. Labor can see the damage the overseas travel is doing to the Prime Minister. And that Resolve poll that you point to, we didn't really need a poll to know cost of living is the top problem for the public, and that now that the distraction of the Indigenous referendum has gone, that people are concentrating even more so on the government's performance. But that Resolve poll was taken before the interest rate increase. Imagine what it would have shown if it had been taken after the interest rate increase. The government has got a problem in these last couple of weeks of Parliament of not having a positive agenda to replace what was the agenda of the Indigenous voice to Parliament.
Which was a catastrophic failure. Dennis Shanahan, thank you.